Or on mute, Shruti.
Yes. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Resource persons Sadhana ma'am and Dr. Dharav sir. Dr. Hamid Dabolkar will be joining us in some time. I also welcome again all the participants. And before we start with the technical session, I would request all the participants to keep your microphone on mute. Kindly prevent yourself from sharing your screen so that whatever the resource persons will be sharing, it will be uninterruptedly visible to all of us. So it is requested make sure that you keep your microphone on mute and you prefer do not share your screen whether you are using a mobile phone or a desktop or laptop. And the participation certificate will be issued. It will take few days time, but it will be issued to all the participants. A feedback link will be shared in the chat box for the whole, the complete program. So there will be only one feedback link, and you all are requested to give your valuable feedback because those help us to plan our next programs. So your feedback are very valuable to us. That will also help us to issue the certificates of participation to all of you. With this, I will stop these basic instructions. Now, about this theme, mental health in an unequal world. When I read this theme, this title, it really clicked to my mind, and especially now when you see that someone is saying my sound is very.
Ma'am, it's on mute.
Thank you for telling me again. So this theme really clicked to my mind, and especially now when you see that
Beyond that, it is economical, whether it is social status, whether it is the condition that the person has, whether it is a temporary condition, medical condition, treatable, or whether it is a chronic condition, or whether it is a permanent condition. Then it is also about the socio-economic status, education wise inequality. So there are a lot of areas in which the inequality lies in this world. And mental health is an important component of our overall health. It has its own significance in our physical health as well. Still, this inequality in the world has its influence when it comes to the mental health of the community members, you and I, and the service access and the understanding of it. So I'm very glad to have the resource persons with us, Dr. Sadhana Nagman, who is a feminist psychotherapist, Dr. Dharav Shah, who is an activist in addiction prevention, and Dr. Hamid Dago, working in the field of eradication of the blind beliefs, and he's a consultant psychiatrist. He is also working in the community awareness, mental health, community-based rehabilitation for people having chronic psychosocial disabilities. So I'm really glad to have all of you, sir and ma'am. And now let's start with our first technical session. So I would take just a minute to give a brief introduction about our first resource person. Our first resource person, Dr. Sadhana Nathu. She is an associate professor and head of the Department of Psychology at Modern College, Ganesh Hind, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. She has long-standing experience of 32 years as an academician, feminist psychotherapist, researcher, writer, and activist in women's movement. She is engaged with the work on gender and mental health, youth and mental health, and intersectional mental health. She is associated with several community-based organizations working at grassroots level in the development sector. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us, and I would request you to start with your presentation. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, first of all, I would like to thank Kirti Sudha Rajput and all her colleagues at Niepid for inviting me to interact with all of you. So, greetings from Pune, Maharashtra, and I hope I'm able to do justice to what is expected from me, and we'll have a Q&A later after all the three resource persons. I think Kirti Sudha is also speaking. So once we are done, I will wait for the Q&A that is to follow later. So without too much of preamble, let me start with my presentation. And I think you all can hear me. So the audio is not a problem. So let me start with women and mental health, because I'm going to move on to women with disabilities and mental health and what are the challenges. But I thought I should lay out the field starting with women and mental health. And all of us are aware of the secondary status that women across strata still continue to occupy within our society, and the different kinds of social stratifications. So why this unequal world? Because it's full of different kinds of inequality, whether they have to do with class, minority religions, marginalized castes, and so on. So women as such bear the burden of both physical health and mental health challenges overall, within our society. And then we have to also understand, moving beyond the binaries of men and women into an intersectional approach in mental health. And those who want to understand more from research and in a conceptual framework, my latest book, so on the slide I have shown a photograph of my book, which is called Psychology and Gender. It's a reference book from Sage. It is available on Amazon, and you can take a look at it, because it goes from everyday life to therapy and the rest, and it is not written from an ableist perspective. So you get the disability discourse also in it. So I am, in a nutshell, sharing from my own research and my book, because the time given to me is 25 minutes plus. So we have to move beyond these binaries of just women and find out that in this unequal world, who gets left out? So whether we are talking about men or women or the queer, it is the poor who get left out. They do not have access to health and mental health. It is several people from the margins. So these are marginalized castes, marginalized tribes. They get left out because they don't have the affordability of accessing healthcare. So they have been left out. The different minorities get left out. And obviously, the disabled of different types, so the various range of disability, they get left out. And when at the end, I'm going to talk about the way forward. So there is a background to why the slogan this time for 10th October is mental health in an unequal world. Because for the last 5 years, the mental health division of the WHO has been doing some good work, but we'll come to that later. So it is an unequal world, especially for those on the margins. One cannot honestly say that those who come from dominant sections of our society are facing inequalities. So it is only certain sections that I have named who are facing these inequalities, and these challenges get, underlined when it comes to health and mental health. Just a little bit on women and mental health in COVID-19 times. And from the data that has been coming in, from the statistics that has been coming in, most of you are aware that, COVID has exacerbated the condition that several women, and here we are talking about women from all strata, that they have been going through. And this has affected their emotional health, their mental health. So one of the studies that I wrote up, something that happened with, work from home, really translated into more work for a number of women, and this threat of being pushed out from paid work. So we have seen that, and obviously women from the unorganized sector, so once again poorer women, have lost jobs. Lower middle class women
Excuse me,
have
ma'am.
lost jobs. Yeah.
Excuse me, ma'am. Sorry to interrupt. I think your screen is not visible. Will you please share
No,
it
I
again?
am sharing my screen. Yeah, can you see it now?
Yes, yes.
The problem with Google Meet is you either share the screen. So Zoom is a good platform where, in that square, you can be seen. So all right, you won't see me, you'll see my screen, and you'll see me right at the end. So I'll remain here.
We are.
Yeah, and keep sharing this. So all right, so I have said here, so I'm citing my own study where work-life balance, became work balance for a number of women. This is just to give you a slice of what was happening to the emotional health of a number of women who were trapped. Then what happened to poorer women? Our community-based organizations working at the grassroots were telling us that their help seeking vis-a-vis physical health, mental health, that was severely hindered. It was not possible for field workers to reach out in our bastis and go and actually do work, do relief work, and also for these women as well as men and children to really access health, mental health care. So this is the broad background of women in general, even before COVID, that their mental health is never a priority. And then in COVID times, we know how everything spiraled. Gender-based violence obviously spiraled. And later on, when I talk about women with disability, we'll know how they were way worse in terms of facing this violence. And my own observation, because I was doing online therapy for 4 months, and women who live in different kinds of bastis where I come from, where community-based grassroots organizations are working. So they were using a cell phone to get to online therapy. And one could see that not just domestic violence and interpersonal violence, but what they were talking about suffering from was severe post-traumatic stress disorder, not just PTSD. So we saw plenty of that, and very little really could be done in terms of helping them to get on with their lives. Some work was done, but it was way too little. So this is about women and mental health in general and in COVID times. Now let me, talk a little more about women with disabilities. Now, interestingly, when we look at life stories in public domain, several studies and various people working in the field have noted that men with disabilities and their lives, that work got published since 1960s, 70s, and 80s. And these two people whom I'm citing, Nasima Huzruk and Preeti Monga, there are several others, but this is just to give us a bird's eye view. So their life stories and their work was put together much later, 1990s, 2000 onwards, that we know about the work. Of course, the Dorian, Helen Keller, all of us are familiar with her and her initiatives. Now, Nasima Huzruk, who comes from my part of India, so Kolhapur, Maharashtra, who, as you can see, is a wheelchair user, and her autobiography is called in Marathi Char Chakachi Kurchi, which means she is in this wheelchair which has four wheels, and that sort of encompasses her life. Now, she started this organization called Helpers of the Handicapped in Kolhapur, and that was reaching out to poorer communities of disabled, and some great, fantastic work. Now, what were the mental health, aspects that Nasima ji has put out in what she has written and what she has worked on is starting from very, very poor self-esteem. Okay, because within families, you are treated, as though this is a big, big liability. Yes, there may be love and a sense of belonging, but the kind of care that needs to be taken comes with a cost. So families often look at disabled children and persons as a liability and as a burden, and that definitely impacts their mental health. And we see that, we understand that from her writings and those of us who have actually visited the work. So we know that reaching out to children, young adults, and older people who are disabled and doing confidence building is the first layer of mental health. Preeti Monga, who is visually impaired and has written several books, so though she comes from a different class, she too has narrated the kind of challenges, and we have to remember that these life stories tell us about the mental health challenges in the voices of people who have gone through all these troubles, these hindrances, and who feel severely discriminated against in terms of opportunity. So we have a work that we can, go to and understand from, and more of such work really needs to, come in, and we all need to engage with it. A couple of people who have worked diligently on women with disabilities and mental health are, of course, Anita Ghai, who is a wheelchair-bound person herself, and she's a trained psychologist. But from the field of psychology, she moved on to disabilities studies. And from her, we see several, articles, research work, and books on disability studies and the gender aspects. So what happens to women who are disabled and how is their mental health affected? The other researcher is Renu Adlakha, who is visually impaired, and her own work, again, she's done a lot of work. But if I have to speak about deconstructing mental illness, an ethnography of psychiatry, women, and family. So what I have written in my book, based on my research as well as intervention work. So I practice as a feminist psychotherapist, and I engage with work on the ground with community-based organizations. Renu Adlakha has told us how that happens in the lives of disabled women. So first of all, you are a woman, so you have a lot of disadvantages. Then you're a disabled woman, so you have some more disadvantages. And third, if you're a diagnosed woman, so you suffer from common mental disorders or severe mental disorders, so that you fall into one diagnostic category, then you are thrice handicapped. And not to forget intersectional dimensions. Then adding on to these three layers, you're a poor woman, so obviously the access. You're a woman from marginalized caste, so obviously some more taboos, and so on and so forth. So these multiple identities for women with disabilities and their mental health are really, really a huge challenge, and our systems. So this ethnography tells us what do our mental health systems, whether they are psychiatry or clinical psychology or medical psychiatric social work and so on and so forth. How do we engage with these human beings? So on the background of COVID-19, and one of the speakers is Dr. Hamid Daborkar. So I'm sure he'll shed more light on community mental health. But my own personal take is, because I work with organizations and I also have my own private practice that allows me to see both these worlds. So my own take has been for some time that our individual-centric therapeutic model is very, very faulty. And now COVID has proved it. What COVID has done is exposed all these gaps in our public health system, of which mental health is one, dominant, important aspect. So we have to move to community mental health for all kinds of people, and definitely for people with disabilities, and then women with disabilities as well, because then it becomes accessible. We reach out to people, and when they reach out to us, whether it is in the public system or the private, we are accessible. That is extremely important. Another important thing is that, so all of you can take a look at Renu Adbukha's work and Anita Ghai's work, because it sort of challenges several movements. The interesting thing is that and I'm a part of the women's movement, while the women's movement has taken some time to move from an ableist perspective, means presuming that we are only talking about able-bodied persons and we only care about them, to embracing a non-ableist perspective in our theory, our work on the ground, intervention, so on and so forth. Similarly, the disability movement, does it really address women, queer persons? So both these researchers have asked these questions, and that is what the intersectional approach to mental health means, that we sort of encompass हम अलग अलग जो आइडेंटिटीज हैं उन सब पे और ध्यान दें, ना कि homogenize people, because if we do that, then those who are already getting help will get more help. Those who have all kinds of access will get more access, and those who get left out, those who are vulnerable, they continue to be vulnerable. So it's very important that we underscore these aspects. Now, another thing that has been left unaddressed because it is so contentious, it is so complex, is what happens to women with disabilities, their sexuality and mental health. Now, very little work is happening because people think that rehabilitation is important, welfare is important. Fine. It's not that it is unimportant. But these women who may be disabled also have ideas about love, desire, and so on. And there is a film based on the life of Mithu. It's sort of borrowed from her life with her permission. Mithu Alur, who started the Spastic Society of India in Mumbai. It's called Margarita with a Straw. It's, in a way, it's about upper middle class, but nevertheless, it tells you that a woman who is disabled also wants choices about sexuality. And when she cannot make these choices, obviously her mental health is impacted. And it's not always disorders. So you don't directly see disorders, but you see a lot of distress, a lot of pain, a lot of unresolved issues. So a number of things when it comes to women with disabilities, and obviously this applies to men with disabilities too, and applies to trans women and so on and so forth. So a number of persons who are disabled, but they have their own sexual identity as well. And if that is not attended to, then that is one more thing that impacts their mental health. And this is a very sensitive, nuanced point, but it is a central point of people's lives. And here too, very little work has been done, and we all need to engage in our own ways with this. Moving on to women with disabilities during COVID times, and what did that do to their mental health or ill health as a byproduct. So we all know anybody working with psychosocial disabilities, practitioner in NGOs and community-based organizations, and students also should know that UNCRPD definitely was a leap ahead. Our own laws of rights of people with disabilities, the older one 2005, the newer one 2016, are recognizing at the back of the UNCRPD and trying to give some relief. But when it comes to implementation on the ground of these policies, of these acts, once again, we need an intersectional approach. We can't just say people with disabilities when we talk about accessibility and inclusion, because for somebody, the issue may be that what happens to the ramp and the access when I'm taking a flight. But for the poorest of the poor is what happens in buses, trains, and that is creating frustration. That is definitely bringing on anxiety. So definitely mental health is at stake here. But we cannot have a top-down approach in this. We need a bottom-up approach when we are talking about accessibility and inclusion, because we have to think of whose accessibility and inclusion are we talking about. So those who are already living in that unequal surrounding, that unequal ecosystem, will need way more. The lockdown showed us that from the categories of the disabled, since news was coming in, since a lot of stuff was coming in online, so obviously the speech and hearing impaired, all this came in. Somebody's audio is on. May I request you to please? Thank you. So amongst the disability spectrum, the speech and hearing impaired obviously lost out a lot. Those with, who are visually impaired also, because when we talk about accessibility, are they able to access? Not all of them are going to be able to access the internet and the social media, etc., etc. So more and more panic and anxiety during the lockdown for all kinds of disabled people, especially these categories, and the women among them more at the receiving end. We know that we are sanitizing and hand washing for disabled women who in their household anyway have a lower position, are becoming more and more dependent on caregivers, because not all of them have some, have this wheelchair. If they're wheelchair bound people, they're not going to have this electric wheelchair, obviously, in all households, and the rest also. So the dependence aspect, which impacts mental health in a negative way, that also increased. And among all the categories, several studies have shown that were done in the last 2 years that intellectually disabled women, since they are not able to articulate what they are going through, their vulnerability was the most, because they're not able to speak out, they're not able to describe what they're going through, and they remained, literally invisible in terms of their mental health challenges. So there has been quite a bit that is very, very troublesome in these last 1.75 of a year from March 2020. And this is in the lives of people who already were facing a number of problems before. So obviously their problems multiplied. Gender-based violence, women of all types were facing, and we know how ironical the stay home, stay safe proved to be. So like I said previously, the disabled women's data became invisible in this gender-based violence, because who's going to report it? How is it going to be reported? So we have to add to the data that came in, to government bodies, to NGOs, to CBOs. We have to add the disabled women to that, disabled girls to that, and trans disabled women to that. And we don't know what those numbers are. Those numbers are huge. Quite a few reports have come out. One is the Human Rights Watch report, Invisible Victims of Sexual Violence, Access to Justice for Women and Girls with Disabilities in India. We need to look at it more carefully if we want to work on women with disabilities and mental health. We definitely need to understand what is spelled out, because we know that sexual violence against women has increased in the last 10 years. Several, what the Verma Commission has said for women in general, but disabled women and girls in particular, this is something that needs to be flagged off. It's a red flag. Report Neglected and Forgotten Women with Disabilities During COVID Crisis has spelled out the problems of access, social protection, health, education, everything in a local and global context. And I'd like to connect my previous point that recommendations for inclusion of women with disabilities, now when we are calling COVID a disaster, both in the Act and UNCRPD, but not forgetting intersectionality again. Because those who have the least access, they are going to have the most difficulties in inclusion. Think of a COVID ward where there was simply not ready to admit women with disability who were suffering from COVID, because who is going to do the additional care? And obviously this has increased the anxiety, moderate depression, and so on and so forth that these women have gone through, that you are simply discarded from your basic human rights of treatment and care. So this has really added to the woes and the suffering of both men, women with disability, as well as transgender persons with disabilities. We know that when several issues of violence and particularly sexual violence are brought out, there is this interesting strand of trying to further vulnerabilize the vulnerable. So are they really asked what kind of access do you want? What kind of help do you want? Very often their story, their version is not really heard or recorded. All of us who have worked in the women's movement, and one has seen that these kits, these safety kits which have come out from the good efforts of several community-based organizations, that how do you really record the evidence of somebody who has gone through rape, who has gone through molestation, for the further enquiries that are going to happen. Now, we have to think differently for the disabled, for the differently abled when they go through similar kind of, atrocities. And that work is still waiting to happen, because how will a visually impaired woman record what she has gone through? How is an orthopedically challenged woman going to record? And imagine the mental health paralysis that these women have gone through in these heinous acts. So that is again some work that is still incomplete. It still needs to be done, and done better. And there are several such unresolved things, and it's a field that needs more and more efforts. So what? So I have sort of outlined for you all women and mental health as a generic thing, women and mental health in COVID times, particularly women with disabilities, their voices, research that has been done on women, disability, and mental health, and then women with disabilities, mental health challenges again, and some more. And though these reports are telling us what has happened and what we need to do further, as a cohesive effort, we need to look at this once again. So what is the way forward? Obviously, looking at the work that has come from organizations themselves that are catering to either gender issues, disability issues, and very few of them to gender issues along with disability. So one very, very positive thing, and that's why this slogan came out this year, mental health in an unequal world, because for the last 5 years, the mental health division of the World Health Organization, which is headed by Dr. Michelle Funk, and in 2016, we had a conference, an international conference here in Pune, India, and I was very fortunate that I could present my work, and my entire department could present its work in this entire conference. And in 2016, this Quality Rights Initiative was launched, and Michelle Funk was here in Pune, India, and some of us got a chance to, be a part of their surveys, give inputs, etc., etc. And in June 2021, this year, this rights-based community mental health services package was unveiled. It is available on the WHO website. This is definitely a step in the right direction after a long, long time. And it's the efforts of Michelle Funk and her entire team, along with collaborations from the Global South. So from India, we had Dr. Saumitra Pathare with the Atmiyata project, which happens in Gujarat and Mumbai. So he did a presentation, and there were several others from the Global South, from poorer developing countries. And the interesting thing for all of us, since we are talking about disability and mental health today, is that it takes into account disability. Several packages are aligned with UNCRPD, and for once, it is giving primacy to the Global South instead of the Global North, whose data, whose models, and whose top-down approaches we have been using so far. So some of you may have taken a look at it. The live program happened on 10th June 2021. It's available on YouTube WHO channel, and you can watch it. It was fantastic. I had goosebumps since some of us were a part of the survey. We were sent the Zoom link, and I was really, really gratified because all the speakers, some of them were from not-for-profit organizations, some of them were from rights-based groups, some of them were practitioners. They were all showing a respect for biopsychosocial model of mental health. And we know that the biomedical model has been dominating It will continue to dominate because of the hierarchies that exist in mental health. But mental health division of WHO taking cognizance, because Michelle Funk works with law, advocacy, gender, and mental health, and she's aware of disability discourse, and so is her team. So everybody was spelling out subjectivities, inequalities, disabilities, those who are specifically engaged in disability and mental health. And it was a beautiful, beautiful launch. So do watch the video. It's available now. And all the material that has been shared, the case studies from Global South, those who are particularly interested in disability work, there is that, and there is generic work. So I think that is a pretty good, lead for all of us, because it is full of research, it is full of implementation models, case studies from different places. What have people done? What are the hitches? And it has the participation of people themselves. People, diagnosed persons, users, people with disabilities. So it is definitely not about us without us. So the call that has been given by disability rights movement all over the world, nothing about us without us, this document for once has followed that. So there is participation, equal participation. User perspective has also been respected. So I think that is one aspect of the way forward for us. And all these documents have been beautifully brought out. There are songs, there are videos, there is different kinds of material, which shows the energy that is there in the mental health sector, but which needs to be recognized, acknowledged, and put in center stage. So that is one aspect of moving forward. If we want to work on disability mental health, women with disability mental health, and use the intersectional approach in mental health where nobody gets left out. The other thing is for all of us citizens as civil society need to take on these challenges. Government systems, of course, but it has to be a bhagidari, it has to be a coalition of all of us, including educators. So I also teach clinical psychology, and I've told a number of my students, especially my master's students, to attend, because our mainstream psychology, psychiatric social work, psychiatry is only currently talking about psychosocial disabilities, using the word psychosocial disabilities, and we need to do more. Disability rights activists, of course, people with disability themselves, caregivers, and we need to have, a dialogue together to address the different issues so that we can at least begin to resolve them. And some are more complex than the rest, like women with disabilities, their sexuality, and their mental health, and how that ties up. In 2018, in Maharashtra, with the encouragement of the Disability Commissioner of Maharashtra, lots and lots of organizations, individuals, teaching programs of psychosocial health, psychosocial disabilities, we had come together for a 2-day program to share, do information dissemination, do planning, campaigning, etc., etc. And about 1,000 people from all over Maharashtra attended. And we took the work forward slightly in 1819, a bit in 1920, and COVID struck. But when I was invited to talk, today, I have shared this, webinar poster with our mental health forum, where all of us did that work. And we need to, get back to this agenda again with more vigor, because we did some work for 3 years so that these sectors come together. We don't work in silos just on mental health, women and mental health, disability separate, and not talking to each other, because there are some problems are the same and some are acutely different. So this coming together, and I'm so glad that this webinar has allowed me to, share my thoughts with so many people from across India, and I hope we continue these kind of collaborations and learn from each other. So I'm sticking to my 30 minutes because I do want a question and answer. So I think the way forward is to come together and build a community of care. Okay, so my own study, which I cited, where I have used Carol Gilligan's model of the ethics of care. So COVID has taught us that we need to have a community of care. So carers, practitioners, all separate, and all working in silos, all fragmented, will just not do, because we know that our practitioner to patient ratio is so skewed, is going to remain skewed. So another pet, peeve of mine is peer support groups, and they will work for people with disabilities also. So self-help groups, peer support groups, besides practitioners and organizations and so on, and government agencies, peer support groups are needed, and more need to be formed. Our students run a youth and mental health peer support group, and they are doing fine. We've been running it for the last 30 years now, and I think this body has really translated into validation of a lot of mental health issues at the primary level. So it's a kind of mental health first aid. So that also has to be tried out, and more needs to be done, is something that I acknowledge. I want to end my presentation quoting Helen Keller, that the only thing worse than being blind or visually impaired is having sight but no vision. So we really need to have the vision to resolve problems, the vision to think of a community of care where we do not fragment people who are vulnerable, but we respect their intersectionalities. We understand where they come from and not just homogenize them, saying, "Are bechare," where we respect their dignity and, then move forward. So if we can do that with vision, then we'll have achieved something, and we will have also resolved some issues. So thank you, people, and I hope that questions will come in the allotted time. And those who need to contact me for something, this is my mail ID, and of course Kirti has it too. So I think on that note, I'd like to my time of exactly introductions and laying the background. And I would love to take questions. So park your questions, because there are more people speaking after me. So thank you, everyone. And I'm happy to have reached out to 133 people and some more on YouTube and so on and so forth. So thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It is a wonderful session that you took, and I understand with the year of experience that you have, 30 minutes is like not really enough time. And you have touched upon so many important topics, like especially about the sexuality, their own physical health, not just, when we get cases of persons with intellectual disability, people talk about their training, IQ tests, reports, but there are lots of things beyond that, and you have very well pointed out so many things, and not just disability, but even other aspects where this inequality lies, and you have given us a way forward. Thank you so much for sharing the resources also that you talked about. I hope, we can take one or two questions. So I would request the participants, if you have any questions, you can type it in the chat box. Or you can unmute yourself and you can ask a question directly.
persons with intellectual disabled person, lot of time COVID-19, and few days before I went to the market shop, and then most of the people cover their mask and don't protect and mask, gloves, not uh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. I understand what you're saying. So some of these, finer skills that we take for granted, obviously people with intellectual disabilities, somebody has to patiently sit, explain in simple words, then get them to do that. Because the simple act of putting on your mask correctly, staying on with it,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
what
Yes,
does it
ma'am.
mean has to be told, then they have to be assisted when they're going out, and so on and so forth. So both uh, a level of understanding as well as assistance is essential, and they too will understand. We have to believe that they too will understand.
Yeah. Well, as I
Yeah, any
cannot
other
see any
question?
question, yeah, I cannot
Yeah,
see any other
I
question
just,
in the
yeah,
chat box.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I just realized, and I'll just take 2 minutes, that I was a part of something called Paryay. It's written about, so people from outside Maharashtra will have also read about it. That in a place called Shirur, which is in Pune district in Maharashtra, there was this government run home for what in 1994 were called mentally retarded, and now thankfully we have moved on to mentally challenged and now intellectually disabled. So there were these young girls, obviously poorer girls, and there was a decision that since they cannot take care of their menstrual hygiene, so called, there was a decision to carry out hysterectomies of these young girls. Okay, and we as a part, me as a really raw youngster at that time, but who was a part of the women's movement, so many of us had come together and we had challenged that, legally, with a writ petition. And the people were saying that, oh, but they don't have minds of their own. And he said, no, all they need is the answer to her question. They need assistance, care, and explanation. Okay? And they too have a right over
Yes,
their
ma'am.
bodies. And we won that petition. And we had one of our MLAs, Ahilya Rangnekar, also filed a private member's bill, and that mass hysterectomy had to be cancelled, and due care had to be taken, that they have social workers there, they have people assisting them, and attendants, and so on and so forth. What if they are, even if they are, poorer girls who are admitted there? So that's another thing that ties up with intellectual disability, the presumption that everybody else can decide for them and they have no mind of their own. So all these are presumptions. And we saw that in poorer places, other homes or other schools which were being run, where there was care, that menstrual hygiene care was taught and they were taking care of. So this is, I just remembered when she asked this question. So all right, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for this enriching session of yours. And we will move on to our next speaker, ma'am.
Yes.
So thank you once again. And all the participants, let us move on to our next session. So I would introduce our next speaker. He is Dr. Dharav Shah. He has already joined us. He has pursued his MBBS and Diploma in Psychiatric Medicine (DPM) from BJ Medical College, Pune. And then he has pursued his MD in Psychiatry from India's top institute, NIMHANS, located at Bangalore. He practices in Mumbai. He has been working since the last 12 years on empowering youth with adequate knowledge about alcohol and tobacco so that they can make an informed choice about getting into the substance use and abuse. Till now, he has given around 450 presentations on this topic. Currently, he is involved with an alcohol prevention campaign run by WHO called Meri Pyari Zindagi. He curates content of the campaign website. I'll share the website link in the chat box. He also conducts workshops on brief intervention and motivational interviewing for mental health professionals. And I would be very glad to say that we have studied together when he was doing his diploma in psychiatric medicine, and I'm very proudly saying that to knowing Dr. Dharau for last so many years, I have witnessed his work in this field, his passion in the prevention of addiction very closely, and I'm very thankful to have Dr. Dharau Shah as a resource person in this program. So over to you, Dr. Dharau. I request you to start with your presentation, and thank you so much for coming here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirti. Thank you, Kirti. So, as Kirti said, we know each other since quite some time, and her passion to work for people with disabilities is something which at times we used to mock at also कि इतना क्या लोगों का think करती है. But yes. So, I am very glad to get this opportunity to speak to you all. Let me share the screen. Kirti, I see that we are running late. So whenever you want me to stop, 5 minutes before that, just tell me.
Sure. Then we can continue till 4:50. That is absolutely fine. Beyond that, if it is required, I'll let you know. Yeah.
4:50. That is 10 minutes.
No. I'm sorry. Yeah, you can continue till 4:55. Not 4:50 will be too less for you. I'm sorry. 4:55 is okay. Yeah.
Okay. Are you able to see the screen by any chance? No.
No, not yet.
Now are you able to see the screen? Yes, no?
No.
Okay.
Do you need some help?
How to share.
Yeah. Do you need some help in that? Have
Yes,
you logged in from 2 different devices?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Now your screen is. I mean, we have started seeing your screen.
Are you able to see?
Yes.
Okay. But I would still request you, I'm not clear when am I supposed to stop. So before 5 minutes, tell me, okay?
Sure.
So
Your file, I mean, folder is open, but the presentation is not yet visible. We can see the folder from where it started.
Okay.
You'll have to share it again.
Yes. I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna try for 10 more seconds. Otherwise, without the PPT, we will start. You're not able to see the PPT, right?
If it is possible, if you can just email me the PPT, I can share
No,
it.
just download it, Dr. Dharau. Download it, okay, and then keep it there on your device, and then from this
downloaded. I've already opened it.
arrow. No, but we could see your folder and not the. If it's downloaded, it will be there on the beam down, and you can share it easily.
Okay. Are you able to see now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for my noise in uploading. Okay. So, how do we connect the theme of this year? Okay, mental health in an unequal world. Often we tell people that people often look upon alcohol dependent people as addict है साला घर का समझता नहीं है क्या बीवी इतनी दुखी है बच्चे इतने दुखी है फिर भी क्यों करता है. Many mental health professionals also during the initial years find it difficult to form empathy with them, to form a rapport with them. So one of the things which we are taught is they are victims and they're not culprits. So people who are dependent on various substances, they have very bad mental health and very bad quality of life. We all see. And if we say that they are victims, then we as a society need to be doing more to make sure that more victims don't get trapped in it, right? So from that perspective, prevention of substance addiction becomes an important goal for people who want to improve the mental health in our society. So it's nice to know what are the causes why people started. Everyone knows alcohol is bad, tobacco is bad, cannabis is bad, but still it's becoming a trend. So why do people take it? If we look at those reasons, then it will give us us some insight. What can we do so that more people don't take it? So one of the reasons why people do is it's curiosity and some misconceptions. One is a belief that uh, it's a great way to deal with stress. One is peer pressure. One is sab karte hain to okay hoga. It is perceived to be normal because people get addicted to it and because it is easy and accessible. So let's look at some of them, especially the ones which are connected to mental health. So this is a simplistic way to understand why do people get addicted. So as you see, the first time you take a puff or a drink, you get a high and you feel, wow, kya cheez banai hai Bhagwan ne, too good. But at the end of it, you don't come back to normal. You go below normal. You end up feeling restless, irritable, you don't get sleep, you want one more. When you take the next drink, you get a high, but it is less than the first one. And at the end of it, you're feeling still worse. And the cycle keeps continuing till a day comes in your life, wherein as soon as you get up, you need the eye opener drink just to get started. People who take tobacco cannot go to the toilet till they have taken tobacco in the morning. They cannot pass stools. Their mind and body becomes the slave of this substance. And then this process continues. And the high which you had got with one, then you need two, then you need three. So as we know, this property of increasing need is called as tolerance. The symptoms which a person gets when he doesn't get that substance is called as withdrawal. And the third property is craving. The irresistible or the extremely difficult, the desire which is extremely difficult to control is called as craving. They would say, aaj se ban, from today I'm not going to take it. But then they see someone taking it, they see some ad and they get triggered and they feel, today I will take it, from tomorrow I will stop. So this irresistible desire is called as craving. Now friends, this craving, withdrawal and tolerance are physiological properties of addictive substance. That has nothing to do with your willpower. If you put sugar in your mouth, it will taste sweet. Not because your willpower is low or high, but because it's a physiological property of sugar. Similarly, addictiveness is a physiological property of substances. Around 15% of those who touch alcohol, 17% of those who touch cannabis, and 32% of those who touch tobacco, roughly, they get addicted to it. Now, everyone doesn't get addicted, but 15% is a big number. So if currently around 140 people are seeing this presentation, if all of us start drinking in parties in the next 10 years, around 40 of us would get addicted. 40 or 35 of us would get addicted. Is that a small number? No, I overestimated, right? 15 out of 100. So when we say 140, so let's say around 25. Around 25 us will get addicted. I believe that's a big number. As a psychiatrist, I have seen a lot of families get ruined. And therefore, one of the main messages I try to give young people is that quitting this is difficult. And when we know that hundreds of families, lakhs of families have got ruined this way, it's best to not go that way. Okay? Mental health. So people often start using these substances with the hope that it is gonna make them happy, that it is gonna decrease their stress.
I'm
But the
sorry to
irony is,
interrupt, Dr. Dharav. I think someone else has started sharing the screen, so you may have to start sharing it again. Start
okay,
sharing the screen.
okay,
And all the participants are requested, kindly make sure that you don't click on share your screen so that the presentation can go uninterrupted.
okay. Are you able to see the PPT now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So what I was saying is, irony is people actually become more depressed and anxious. Now, why is that? Now, you will see that many tobacco consumers would say, okay, after getting up, till I don't take my tobacco, I don't feel enthusiastic enough. Now, is tobacco actually increasing the enthusiasm? Or are people who are used to these substances experiencing a subclinical low throughout the day? And only when they take that substance, they feel a bit of enthusiasm. Okay, so people who are not addicted can study during the exam, but people who are addicted to tobacco cannot enter the library without smoking. That doesn't mean smoking is increasing their ability to concentrate or be enthusiastic or be happy. It is actually killing their ability, and only when they take it do they feel a bit good. Why does this take place? That's because when we do something good, when we achieve something, there is a surge of dopamine in the brain and we feel good. When we take intoxicating substances or addictive substances, there is a supranormal surge of dopamine. So you don't have to do anything, you don't have to achieve anything, and yet you feel I'm cooled down on this earth. Oh, I have achieved so much. Oh, life is so wonderful. So if just spending 10 rupees can give me such a good high, that's such a good deal. But the problem is when the brain gets used to a constant high level of dopamine, then it deregulates the receptors. There is down regulation of the receptors, and because of which now the brain needs more and more dopamine to feel good. And if a basic level of dopamine is not there, it starts feeling as if very things are going bad and withdrawal symptoms start. In fact, once you get hooked onto alcohol, the amount of dopamine with chatting with a friend, playing a sport, drawing a painting would give you is not good enough to give you a high. So once people get addicted to these substances, other things start making less meaning to them. Their interest in other activities start decreasing, and gradually more and more of the time gets consumed in procuring and using these addictive substances. So actually, it has been seen that these substances increase the anxiety and depression which people suffer from. They decrease the quality of life because the various hobbies and activities keep decreasing. Because of the socioeconomic harm they and their family members have to suffer. Addictive substances are a huge reason for mental ill health in our society, in them as well as their family members. Then, of course, you know of something called as induced psychosis, substance induced psychosis. So, people who drink alcohol, delusion of infidelity is quite commonly seen in them. So, they get a doubt their wife is having an affair with someone else. So, those of you who have seen the film Omkara, that has shown this, it has a name called as Othello syndrome. So people actually hit their wives. There are frequent fights, and as shown in the film, that times even kill them. So people addicted to alcohol often show delusion of infidelity. Similarly, nowadays, cannabis is supposed to be a very harmless drug. Out of all the addictive substances, the risk of causing schizophrenia, the mental illness in which you get delusions and hallucinations, the risk of, the spelling is wrong, of course, the risk of causing schizophrenia is highest for cannabis. So I just wanted to point you that I have seen a lot of people ruin their mental health, and afterwards, also there is something called as amotivation syndrome. So ironically, cannabis is proposed to be something which increases your creativity, but it has been well documented that once a person has taken cannabis regularly for a few years, many of them suffer from amotivation syndrome. They don't feel enthusiastic to do anything. They just sit at home and waste their whole day. So you're really wreaking havoc with your brain when you take these addictive substances. And of course, the sleep structure gets impaired. And when the sleep is not good, your mental health is not good. According to WHO, alcohol use is responsible for 18% of the suicides occurring in our society. Partly because people who are addicted to them understand that they are harming themselves, their addiction is harming their families, and yet they are not able to quit it. And they don't see any solution to this. Their wives don't see any solution to this. Therefore, many a times they end up committing suicide. That's the level of mental distress it is creating in our society. Another perspective is taking these substances actually destroys the gray matter of your brain. So if you compare the MRI scan of a person, a normal healthy adult, with a person who has taken alcohol for around 10 or more years, you will see that the blank CSF spaces have become more and the actual brain matter has decreased. So when you are just killing your brain cells, of course, your mental health is going to decrease. Another important evidence to prove to people that these substances actually impair your mental health is a Cochrane review of 102 longitudinal studies. When the meta-analysis was done together, it was proven that people who quit smoking, their anxiety and depression actually decreased, and the magnitude of this effect size was as good as that of antidepressant medicines. In other words, people take smoking and drinking to be happy, but actually quitting it is what makes people more happier. It's just the initial withdrawal phase of few days to few weeks wherein they have to suffer. But if they just endure that for the rest of their life, they will be much more happier, much more confident people. Another aspect of mental health and addictions is people believe it's a great way to deal with stress. So if my girlfriend has left me, oh God, gam ka sathi daru, start drinking. What will happen if you start drinking? Will your girlfriend come back? Or are you decreasing the probability that you won't get a second girlfriend also? So someone has a loan of 20,000 and he starts to drink. Will the loan decrease? Or will it become 40, 60, 1 lakh, 2 lakh unsolvable suicide? When we take an intoxicating substance, yes, we forget the stress. But because we forget the stress, we are not working on it. And because we don't work on it, it actually keeps growing and it worsens our stress. A much better way of dealing with stress is, of course, to take a break if you want, but then focus on it and solve it and remove the stress from its roots, right? So alcohol, tobacco, these are not a symbols of your smartness, but these are certificates that you don't have normal coping skills in life, that you can deal with the ups and downs of life in a healthy way. Also, I often tell youngsters that when I encourage you to not start drinking or to stop drinking, I'm not asking you to be sad. I'm asking you to become more happier in life. When you use constructive ways of becoming happy, sports, music, friends, books, meditation, painting, etc., you not only become happy now, but you develop skills and you feel you get empowered, and which serves you as well as people respect you for that. And because you don't have any addiction gnawing upon your life, in the long term also you don't have to suffer any addictive consequences. And therefore just look around you and ask yourself, who is more happy, who enjoys life more? People who are addicted or people who are independent and who are not dependent on substances? Another important thing, because many of you deal with children, that when people below the age of 18 or 21, when the brain is still developing, when they take an intoxicating addictive substance, that induces much more structural changes in the brain, because of which the ability of the developing brain to memorize things, their ability to learn, their ability to judgment, their impulse control, everything gets impaired. And this leads to poor academic grades, work performance, as well as behavioral disturbances in the long run. And therefore, it's very important that no one should drink, but especially before the age of 18 or 21, you should avoid to drink. Studies have shown that kids who start drinking before the age of 15, they have a 40% risk of getting addicted, while those who start at age 20 or later, their risk of getting addicted decreases to around 10%. They also have a 10% risk, and therefore for them also it's not safe. But for kids, it is extremely dangerous. So what are some of the powerful points you can tell to kids, so that rather than getting curiosity, the film stars and cricketers, they glamorize it and promise them that this is going to bring them happiness and success, and therefore they have curiosity to take it. But if we educate them about the true consequences, then the curiosity will get killed, and no one wants to take a poison, but no one convinces them in an effective way that this is a poison. So some of the data I will quickly go through, that people just associate alcohol with liver damage, but that is just 21% of the alcohol deaths. Then there is accidents, drownings, hypothermia deaths, heart attacks and strokes. Immunity decreases, and therefore that results in infectious diseases like tuberculosis, pneumonia. Under the intoxicated state, people impulsively end up with unprotected sex, giving rise to HIV, and then the decreased immunity results in AIDS faster. During the pandemic, the most important thing we have to now do to protect ourselves is to keep our immunity fit, and alcohol decreases that. 20% of the TB deaths are attributable to the decreased immunity caused by alcohol. Like tobacco causes a lot of cancers, alcohol also causes a lot of cancers. As I said, 20% of the murders and 20% of the suicides in our society. So this slide is saying out of the alcohol attributable deaths, but if you take murders and suicides by themselves, 18% of murders and 18% of suicides in our society are attributable to alcohol. various cancers of the body are there. 30 lakh deaths every year because of alcohol, one death every 10 seconds. And yet, most youngsters believe, I can drink in control. So somehow, all of us, the industry has succeeded in making us believe that if you drink responsibly, it is safe to drink. Friends, no one drinks irresponsibly by choice. It just happens. Once they get addicted, we tell people don't hate them, they are victims, it can happen to anyone. So why don't we tell this to youngsters before itself? It can happen to anyone. There is no person who can feel safe. I will drink in control and I won't get it. Addictiveness is a property of this substance and it can happen to anyone. These are preventable deaths. And if we wish that we and our family don't have to go through hell, it's best to not touch the substances. Regarding tobacco, again, we just know of cancers, but there's a lot of lung diseases, heart attacks, and strokes. When we take alcohol or tobacco, the inner lining of the artery gets damaged, and that makes it more vulnerable for atherosclerosis developing there, and the coagulability of blood also increases when we take the substances, and therefore it causes heart attacks and strokes. In fact, the most common way tobacco kills in our country is not cancers, but heart attacks. And when you talk of heart attacks before the age of 45, 50% of those heart attacks in young men are attributable to smoking. The evidence for smoking is much stronger regarding deaths. There has been a 40-year-long study on a sample size of 34,000 UK doctors, which has proven that 1 in 2 chronic smokers die 10 years prematurely, and the risk of dying prematurely before 70 is 3 times higher than non-smokers. Bottom line, evidence is extremely strong, and that is why tobacco companies are forced to write on their packets, tobacco kills. And in spite of this, some people keep fooling themselves. किसने देखा है, क्या होगा, लंबा भी जी सकते हैं. Exceptions will always be there, but evidence says that increases the risk significantly. In fact, alcohol kills 30 lakh people every year, tobacco kills 87 lakh people every year, twice the amount of alcohol, and yet 42% Indian males take tobacco. Are they fools? Or simply no one has educated them that this substance is also very harmful? Cannabis, I will skip. While we are talking to young people, it's important to tell them that it's not only going to kill them in the long run, but even while they're alive, it's going to impair the quality of their life in multiple ways. One, it's going to cause multiple disabling diseases, and when the health is not good, of course, they are not going to be happy. When the artery to the penis gets harmed, just as when the artery to the heart is blocked, you get heart attack. When the artery to the penis gets constricted, you get impotence, and then that person and his wife have to live sexually frustrated lives. Alcohol and tobacco are two of the most common organic causes of impotence. It also decreases the fertility in men and women. The stamina for physical work decreases. It's a financial disaster, as all of us know. Occupational capacity decreases, and the attractiveness decreases. The skin collagen gets harmed. When you take tobacco, the teeth get stained, the lips get blackened. When you take alcohol, tobacco, your mouth is stinking. You don't know where your hands and legs are going. There is no way women get attracted. Surveys have consistently shown that women do not like when their partners get drunk and they hate it. However, in order to fool youth into believing that drinking is going to get them a sexual partner, alcohol industry shows that in their ads. That's not true. So whatever parameters of masculinity are there, attractiveness, sexual capacity, financial power, physical stamina, professional continence, every parameter, the person gets a beating. So definitely it's not something which enhances your masculinity. If at all it does something, it decreases it. We just saw how it decreases the mental health. To give a broad picture, in the young age group of 15 to 49 years, the young people of society, alcohol is the most common risk factor for death and disability seen in this age group, and tobacco is the second most common risk factor. And this most common risk factor is rapidly increasing in our society. From 2010 to 2016, the number of alcohol users have doubled amongst male and have quadrupled amongst female. The most common risk factor is rapidly increasing, and we are not bothered. And that's because our society still doesn't look upon alcohol as something very harmful. The evidence which is published in medical journals has just not reached people. The industry marketing that so far as you drink responsibly, it is safe to drink, when people who are idealized so much, like Mahendra Singh Dhoni, Shah Rukh Khan, Akshay Kumar, everyone is involved in marketing for these companies. It's very difficult for the youth to imagine that this must be a very bad substance, a very harmful substance. It is our responsibility to collectively take to youth the right facts. I believe if few youngsters take it, we can blame it on them. But if it becomes a trend, it's the fault of the society, which failed to educate its youth at the right time about the true consequences of addictive substances. One common misconception which makes youngsters believe it's okay to drink is that alcohol in moderation is good for the heart. Brief response to that is this statement is not backed by strong evidence. The American Heart Association issues a warning on their website that this is not conclusively proven, and even if it were true, the potential disadvantages of taking alcohol far outweigh the claimed benefits, and hence we caution people not to start drinking thinking that it will protect your heart. There are many safer ways to protect your heart, and actually, alcohol results in a huge number of heart attacks and strokes. Also, now there is evidence that even light drinking, less than 20 grams per day, that is less than 2 drinks per day, that resulted in more than 1 lakh cancer cases in 2020. So definitely no amount of alcohol is safe. People believe occasionally party may be two main answers. Everyone who is an addict today, once upon a time, was an occasional party drinker. What will happen 10 years down the line? There is no guarantee. Majority will not get addicted, but around 15% will. And the second more harm, around 50% end up binging in alcohol, that is drinking to the point of intoxication. You may be looking around you, many of your friends get intoxicated. Around 45% men who drink at least once in their lifetime, or most of them more frequently, end up binging in parties. And most accidents are done by binge drinkers and not dependent people. Even 1 or 2 parties where you have binged, and if that day itself you end up doing an accident, maybe having a question: why would I drive if I have binged? I know I won't. Most people who are intoxicated, their ability to control their car decreases, but that because of the intoxication and the impaired judgment, their confidence to drive doubles. And therefore, people, in spite of being intoxicated, very often drive. 34% road traffic accidents in our country are attributable to alcohol intoxication. Last misconception is 5 minutes. How many minutes? Yeah, 5. Okay.
Yes.
So last. Okay, I didn't hear you. Did you say 5?
Yes.
Okay. Last misconception, beer. So many people say कि मैं तो beer पीता हूँ, मैं दारू नहीं पीता हूँ. So beer is also alcohol. Yes, it is mild alcohol. It is around 5% alcohol. Most people start with beer. Then the beer doesn't give them a high, and then they gradually move on to whiskey, wine, vodka, rum, etc. So it is definitely alcohol, and it does lead to that. And secondly, one pack of beer has around 175 to 225 ml, and one pack of vodka has 30 ml, and both of them have the same quantity of alcohol. So yes, it is mild, but then when you take a proper one pack of beer, that is same amount of alcohol as one pack of vodka. Now, a lot of us know that alcohol is bad. There is such a strong evidence, and yet things are not changing. One of the reasons why things are not changing is it's an addictive substance. And the predominant response of our community, society, is to work on de-addiction. The results are, of course, not good. For any problem, if you want to really solve it in a big way, you have to work on prevention. All the more true for addictive substances. What can we do for prevention? The most important thing is to go to youngsters before the age of first contact and warn them that what they will have to expect if they take it. If we educate well that this is an X, then they won't hit the X on their leg. But we are not doing that. How can we do that? We can do awareness talks in schools, and then of course at a bigger level we can do a lot. But all of us, in our families, in our neighborhood, the youngsters which are there, If we just take responsibility to do our part of educating them well, so many celebrities telling them drink, so much peer pressure telling them drink, and no one telling them don't drink, then why would they not drink? So we don't need to force them, but we have a responsibility to at least recommend. So that we can do. We have to empower youngsters how to deal with peer pressure. I will just tell main points today. The no has to be bold. If they're ashamed, if they're feeling ashamed that they are all forcing and I'm not taking, then they won't be able to face it. They have to feel confident that they are doing the right choice and they have to say a bold no. They have to keep their answer prepared. That will help them say it confidently. And they have to know that India is a country teeming with people. We have population explosion. They don't have to fear losing friends. If they maintain a healthy, successful life, today or tomorrow, they will have the best of friends. But if they let addictive substance ruin their life, then these very friends who made them drink will also leave them and go. Denormalizing it is important. When the youngsters see that everyone around them is drinking, it is normal for them to feel that chalta hai, must not be that harmful. So we have to tell them there are many things which are very common, but they're not normal. Female feticide is common in our country. Madam was saying that women abuse is common in our country. Domestic violence is common in our country. Corruption is common in our country. Child labor is common in our country. Should we start believing that all these things are normal? So in a culture, if there is something which is common and it is helpful for the society, we should proudly promote it and be proud of it. But if in a particular society, some attribute is common and harmful for the society, then I believe all of us should get together and remove it from our society as soon as possible. So we need to denormalize it. We need to tell them that no matter how common it is, even today, more than half the population of this earth does not touch alcohol or tobacco. And celebrities and military people who end up drinking and smoking more commonly, they end up dying because of heart attacks and strokes also commonly, and they do get harmed. Okay, let me skip. Let me talk about the social media campaign we are doing. Because youngsters get the alcohol campaign is so strong by the industry. In order to counter that with an equally engaging and interesting campaign, so we have engaged a celebrity called as Mr. Nilesh Mishra. He's famous for his audio stories. So he is going to make 15 audio stories and 10 short videos which discuss various aspects of the alcohol problem in a very interesting way. The campaign is already started. 2 audio stories and 1 videos are already there. You can see these audio stories and videos on our website, poisonswelove.org. Also, you can just send a message on this WhatsApp number with your name, and we will send you all the audio stories and videos as they keep getting released. If you're in some school, we would encourage you just play any one of these audios or videos during your assembly, and then if the children can see the remaining. And if you want us to make a presentation in your school, we are happy to do that. My presentation on this topic, a detailed 1 hour long presentation, is there on YouTube. It's called as Poisons We Love. To summarize, alcohol and tobacco, cannabis, etc., are a huge cause of physical and mental ill health, and our culture of abstinence is going out, because of which in the past, Western countries had a big problem. We had no problem. We are reaching their values now, and very soon, if it continues, the level of addiction problem in our society will become similar to that in the Western countries. Luckily, there is very strong evidence now which we can use to educate the youngsters why not to start. And as mental health professionals who have witnessed the hell which these substances create, I believe we are in a very empowered position to work on prevention in this area. You can write to me, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dharav. And I understand when you are so passionate about a topic and someone is asking you to finish it up in 30 minutes, it's really not nice. But thank you so much. And yes, as we have been discussing about this for last so many years, that tobacco and alcohol consumption, as you rightly said, has been like considered as a fancy, as fashionable, as normalized, and that has been showing its impact on lives of thousands of people. So your campaign really is very valuable and matters a lot. And I will be sharing the link of your campaign and WHO's campaign in the chat box. And I will also be sharing that information in the WhatsApp group that we have made for the participants. If you have any question, maybe we can take one question. Our next speaker is already there with us. So you can just type your question in the chat box. I can see for both our earlier sessions, a lot of appreciation was there.
Yeah, the biggest thing is 135 of them are still there. So that boosts my confidence. Acha, log sankhya. Thank you.
Yeah. So I
Anyone
think
else?
there is no question. So we will just move on to our next speaker. And thank you so much, Dharav, once again for being with us in this webinar. So let us move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Niepid Rck. Sir, I welcome you in this today's program. Thank you so much for joining us in this program. I will take a minute to have a brief introduction of our resource person. Dr. Niepid Rck has completed his MBBS and DNB in psychiatry. He leads a community mental health and de-addiction initiatives of Parivartan Mental Health NGO in 3 states of India, that is Maharashtra, Assam, and Arunachal Pradesh. He leads Parivartan community-based mental health care to on an average 5,000 people with mental illness and addictions in different parts of India. Parivartan runs 3 rehabilitation centers, 3 day activity centers, 2 patient cooperative food joints, Kiran Peer and caregiver support group, 24-hour suicide prevention helpline with a team of around 40 community mental health workers of different cadres. He's a lead applicant with Jan Man Swasthya program. Many components of this program are now official part of National Mental Health Policy and WHO MG Gap Reduction Program. And he's a site coordinator for the COSPI Trail, First Community-Based Rehabilitation RCT in LAMIC, if I'm reading it right. And sir, kindly correct me and please tell us something about this as well. This is a little new to me and would love to know about it. So I welcome Dr. Niepid Rck, sir. Thank you so much for joining us and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirti Sudha, and good evening, everybody. It was excellent talk, Dharav. Nice to hear you after a long time. And Natu, hi, Natu madam also. See, I have inborn and carefully groomed disability to share screen. So if anybody, let me try first if I can overcome that. If I can't, then I hope Kirti Sudha will
Sure, sir, not a problem.
send you my presentation, Kirti Sudha.
So do you want us to share your presentation?
If I can't, just give me a minute.
Sure, sure. By the time I would just inform participants that the feedback link will be shared at the end of the program. So your screen, you have started sharing your screen, sir.
Why?
Yes, your screen we can see.
Okay, just one sec.
So, but let me help you. I think you are
So
sharing.
good. I think, yeah, what?
Yeah, so yes, now your presentation is visible.
Yeah, more than anything, the take-home message for me is that this kind of disabilities are not permanent, and if you try enough, then they can be overcome.
Yes.
Jokes apart, am I audible?
Yeah. Yes, you are audible, but I would request if you stop sharing and you start sharing only PPT. Kindly do not share the whole screen.
Okay, so will you do the sharing, Kirti Sudha? I think that might be. I'm not sure how to do this.
Yeah, you just have. It may take another 5-10 minutes, sir. But it would be nice if you can just try.
Okay. So what I am supposed to do here?
Stop share. Yes. Now you click on this arrow. Share. Present now. And you have to select the PPT only and not the whole desktop or not the whole screen. So you have to select a window not your entire screen.
Okay. Okay.
So when you select a window, you have to choose your
Yeah,
presentation there. Yes,
I have. Yeah. Has it start coming now?
it has started coming. Yes, now we can see your presentation. Thank you.
Good. Sorry for the mess, folks. What I'm going to talk today is about community-based rehabilitation, especially for the psychosocial disabilities. What I must say in the beginning is that though we have said it's about psychosocial disabilities, the work that I have done actually on the ground is related to severe mental disorders. And as we have a mixed audience here, what we mean, I'll just take a minute to explain what severe mental disorders mean. Generally, in severe mental disorders, we include schizophrenia and bipolar mood disorders, which are disorders of mind in which the reality testing of that individual is compromised. So, in many other illnesses which cause disability, especially the physical illnesses, though a specific part of body is not functioning up to its potential, uh, the reality testing means the capacity of that individual to understand that he or she is ill and needs help is intact. But in severe mental disorders, that core capacity itself gets affected. So one can understand how difficult it must be to comprehend the nature of disability from the person's point of view and then seek appropriate help. But though the work that we have done is around severe mental disorders and disabilities caused by it, what I realize and what is pretty interesting is that even for intellectual disabilities and physical disabilities, there is a huge unmet psychosocial need which exists in community, and it's not very hard to comprehend why there is this huge psychosocial unmet need. Any disability, if it is even if it is a physical, the nature of illness itself is such that it's a chronic thing. Most of the time, it goes for years together, if not lifelong. It has impact on the psychological well-being of that person, even if you have a disability related to your vision or hearing or intelligence or any part of body. It has psychological consequences around self-image, your perception about your life. It has impact on the family and the relationship, marriage prospects, and community ties. So all of these are very important dimensions of our life, which are generally considered as psychosocial dimensions, and they decide the quality of life as an individual that we live. So, psychosocial aspect in disability treatment is not only restricted to mental health related issues. Uh, the point I want to make is that the insights that we have gathered through our work for psychosocial community-based rehabilitation of psychosocial disabilities, though it is from the severe mental disorders, it's generalizable in most of its cases to other disabilities also. Okay, so what I did wrong? I just want. Uh, have my is screen sharing still happening, or I just
Sir, it stopped
Yes, sir.
now. So give me a minute. I'll help you out with that.
Okay, till Kirti Sudha is trying to help us with the screen sharing, I'd like to move on to my next slide. And even though we don't have the slide, let me just try and take you through the point that I want to make. Uh, there are two types of rehabilitations generally which we talk. One is facility based rehabilitation, and another is community based rehabilitation. And it's pretty evident from the name itself what facility based rehabilitation means. It's a kind of a rehabilitation where the individual who has disability needs to go to that facility to take benefit of the services. So it can be a home for intellectually challenged individual. It can be a daycare facility, or it can be some specialized interventions which are arranged at a specific center where that individual needs to go and take benefit of those services. As we can easily imagine, the costs for building and running such facilities are very high. And third important point is, due to the nature, the very much nature of this facility based rehabilitation, individuals from community who are in need of rehabilitation services, they find it difficult to access those facilities, and sometimes they need to be relocated from their own facility to these facilities of rehabilitation. I will give you one example which is related to my field, and there can be many such examples from the field that you work. The
Excuse
system
me,
of
sir.
mental
Sorry to
hospitals.
interrupt. Yeah, I have started sharing the screen. If you want me to change the slide, you can just let me know.
Yeah, just one slide below.
Yeah.
Uh,
Family-based
Yeah, so
rehabilitation.
we are talking about facility-based rehabilitation, and the 3 points that I wanted to make is that in facility-based rehabilitation, we need to go to facility. The individual needs to go to the facility. Obviously, it has costs involved with it, and many a times it causes a very disruptive dislocation of that individual from his milieu to a completely artificial milieu. And for that, the example of mental hospital systems in India is pretty classical. Initially, they were started basically to facilitate rehabilitation efforts for patients with severe mental disorders. But as one can imagine, if you have around 2,000 odd patients with severe mental disorders in one facility, at home, it's difficult for us to deal with one individual having disabilities. It's almost impossible to imagine a system where we can uh, deal with around 2,000 odd people with disabilities, preserving their human rights. So it's a systematic flaw, it's a systemic flaw which has crept into our thinking. And not only for mental illness, for many other illnesses, institutionalization is considered as the most important and easy way for government to hand out freebies to patient groups and family members who are demanding services for disability or disability right activists who are demanding services for various groups having disabilities. vis-a-vis the idea of community-based rehabilitation. Can we move on to next slide, please? It's in its nature, it's different from facility based rehabilitation. So in facility based rehabilitation, the individual is supposed to go to facility. In community based rehabilitation, we take the whole rehabilitation services to that individual, so which generally in scientific language is called as access. See, giving people things which they can't access in a way is more cruel than not giving them anything. So, for a person living in the remote part of Maharashtra, having a mental hospital and world class rehabilitation facilities situated in Mumbai doesn't mean anything, because he or she can't travel to Mumbai day in and day out. So it's very important for us to consider to take these services to the individuals and families. What happens naturally is the costs, those are there for the rehabilitation, are shared. The strengths of the family and community, they are also shared. When we talk about facility based rehabilitation, you might have seen many homes for intellectual disabilities where 50, 60, 100 kids are living under one roof, and there is hardly one or two adults who are taking care of them. Then when we are doing this, obviously we are taking out the normative experience of living in family and community from them, and taking them, dislocating them from their community and taking them to a place to teach them skills how to live in community. So isn't it kind of a contradictory concept? If you want that individual to learn how to live in community, it should start. We should think of starting the whole process in community itself. There can be periods when the person is not well and there is a need for intensive rehabilitation efforts. Facilities will be required, but obviously not as a first choice. As a first choice, what people need to have access to is a community-based rehabilitation. Next slide, please. So what generally we do in community-based rehabilitation? So it's a multidisciplinary team. So taking the rehabilitation services for psychosocial disabilities to families doesn't mean that we need to give poor quality services to poor individuals. That is not the equivalent for community based rehabilitation. So we are pretty clear that when we talk about community based rehabilitation, it's the best of the services taking down to community, and for that one needs to have a multidisciplinary approach. Without multidisciplinary approach, what we might end up doing is a poor quality service for poor individuals. So the team needs to have the domain expert, specialists, and trained and very closely supervised non-specialist workers. So this is a strength-based model in which we considered community volunteers, peer caregivers as the part of the team, and the process of coming back to the normal life always has an element which is associated with community. What we need to do is just make sure that community and the family are sensitive enough and have the proper knowledge to help and guide that individual to regain back the lost role. So the community-based rehabilitation is need-based. So these two words are very important. It's a need-based and it's individualized. So it's not like Sab Ghode 12%, the way we say in Hindi. It's not and as we know, the disability for every individual is different. The meaning of disability, though they might have a similar disability, the meaning of that disability in their life context is very unique. They might have their own strengths and weaknesses, to deal with those disabilities, and uh, they have a huge impact on the final outcome. So we need not provide the whole package to everybody. If somebody has a very supportive family system, then there are chances that some of the members from family will gradually be in a position to take role of co-therapist, or a person in the family to collaborate with as the key individual in the whole process. So it should be need based and individualized. Next session, next slide. So I am sure we are running a bit late, and as we are talking about need-based and individualized things, I am bearing in mind your individual needs to finish this session as early as possible, and I won't drag it too long. So what I will like to briefly mention about the experiences we had. There are four different initiatives I have been part of in last almost decade and a half, where we have piloted and tried and tested the community-based rehabilitation approach for patients with severe mental disorders. So COPSI, COPSI, the way we pronounce it, was the one of the first and largest community-based rehabilitation randomized control trial, which has happened in LAMIC. LAMIC is very fancy word, but what it means is lower and middle income countries. So in developing world, this was one of the first and largest trial of community-based rehabilitation, which actually happened at three different places: Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and Goa, and subsequently got published into the Lancet, where a team of psychiatrists with psychiatric social worker and community health volunteers who were trained specifically through development of a manual, the psychosocial disability reduction manual. It had a package of care which starts from identification to rehabilitation, which is done at your home. And what we found in that trial is community-based rehabilitation is equally effective as the treatment that is provided at the facility by trained specialists in urban areas. And in rural areas, obviously where the facilities are limited, it is actually more beneficial than the facility based rehabilitation services. So I think these were very encouraging results, and over subsequent three programs, the Incense program, Janman Swasthya, and the Thrive initiative, we have built a base of knowledge around this community-based rehabilitation, where in Incense we tried to work with two of the largest mental hospitals in Asia: Pune Regional Mental Hospital, Yarowda, and then LGB Institute in Tejpur, to make sure that in addition to the facility-based services, these hospitals have a community-based outreach services also. Otherwise, as we know, though many of the facilities for such kind of rehabilitation efforts are at the heart of the city, due to the access, there are many patients around, even in the suburbs, around those centers who can't access the facility-based services. So each and every facility which has such kind of services needs to have a community outreach component attached to it also. And through Incense program, we developed a template how a facility can develop a community-based outreach team and how outcomes can be improved due to that attachment of a community-based rehabilitation team to a facility. Otherwise, what we experience many a times is called as a revolving gate. So when that individual is in facility, they improve, and when they go back to the community, there is hardly any follow-up service. So they relapse, and then all the gains that we have achieved through the process of rehabilitation come back to the zero, and then again they have to come back to the facility. So this is like a vicious circle, and if we want to break that, the facility based intensive efforts needs to be augmented by community-based rehabilitation initiative. In Janman Swasthya program, we did a very similar exercise of a COPSI trial where a end-to-end service, right from identification to community-based rehabilitation, was provided at 6 different sites in India for patients having severe mental disorders, and we had a huge cohort of more than 1,000 odd patients with severe mental disorders for whom these services were delivered. And what we realized, especially for mental health, as the nature of disability is fluid, because if there is early diagnosis, then the nature of disability changes drastically. Early diagnosis and early intervention, as many of us know, is very important as far as disability reduction is considered. So this model also, what we realize is it should not be as Natu madam said, it should not be in silos. The services for clinical care and rehabilitation should go hand in hand, because it's a for that individual, it's a continuum. So we can't for our own sake separate it out into the different pieces. And the last and most important part of the work that we did was this Thrive initiative. So see, rehabilitation again has a negative tinge to it. So we are giving something which is not there with that individual, which they have lost due to disability, back to that individual. So the whole concept of rehabilitation revolves around it. But at the same time, we keep on forgetting that we have an individual who has many other facilities which might be much more relevant than many other facilities that a so-called normal individual like us has. So they have also a huge capacity to contribute and thrive. So employment and meaningful expression for various in various spheres of life is also very important, which generally gets dampened due to the process of illness and disability. So in Thrive initiative, we have focused a lot on how to bring the joy back to the people who have disabilities and their families, and employment. Employment is very important, part of it. Unless and until that person starts earning money and start becoming a productive member of the family, whatever we talk about rehabilitation remains as a lip service. So through all these 4 programs that we have run on ground for last almost a decade and a half, the lessons I will just like to share with you in my last slide. Last slide, please. So the take home messages and lessons. that community-based rehabilitation is feasible and cost-effective strategy for rehabilitation. So, as there are quite a few youngsters who will be thinking of pursuing their careers in the field of rehabilitation, processes in different disabilities. I think this is very important for them to learn that it's not only about the facilities. If we go to community and take them on board, community based rehabilitation is feasible and cost effective strategy of rehabilitation. Due to its structure, it allows the robust participation of peer, caregiver, and community resources. Always we talk about participation of peer, caregiver, and community resources during the process of rehabilitation. But if the rehabilitation is happening in some ivory towers, which is completely unrelated to community, it's very difficult for peer, caregiver, and community resources to come on board. So it's a structural flaw. If we take the rehabilitation processes to community, then obviously their involvement is facilitated. And I think what we need to remember as a word of caution is that talking about community based rehabilitation does not mean that we are against facility based rehabilitation. There are times in individuals life where a facility based rehabilitation is required. It's important, but generally they are short periods. Most of the life that that individual lives happens back home. So, facility based rehabilitation works as a backup option, not as the first line option. And we need experts from the hub of the facility based rehabilitation, which can train and supervise teams of community based for community based rehabilitation. And through the work that we have done in a decade and a half, what we have realized is that it is feasible and cost effective. So when you think of working in the field of rehabilitation, the take home message is don't forget that you have community and that individual and their families as important assets to the individualized and need based rehabilitation plans you make. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Especially in this COVID pandemic situation when parents could not reach to the services, their children were in need of therapies, their children were in need of special education. This need of community-based work, community-based rehabilitation, as you mentioned in your presentation about peer caregiver, was really felt. That need was felt even for the population of persons with disabilities, persons with intellectual disabilities, and many, because Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment has launched this Kiran Mental Health Helpline, and we are a part of it as volunteers. We have been receiving many calls seeking information and services where they are not being able to approach or access the facility based services during the COVID pandemic. And this need of CBR was really felt hard. Uh, and even Rehabilitation Council of India has again started a formal course also again in CBR. There are different community-based organizations as well. And it was really wonderful to learn more about your work, all the projects that you have explained us. So thank you so much once again. If we can take one question, if you have any, you can just type your question in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and ask your question. I know we planned it till 5:30 and it is little beyond. I apologize for that because we started it a little late. But I think we really had wonderful three resource persons, very experienced, who actually have worked on ground. So if you have any question, please type it in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask. Sir, by the time someone asks question, I only would like to know, like, there is a concept called community medicine. Would you like to throw some light about it? So you will have.
Sorry. So community medicine, yeah. So community-based rehabilitation is a part of community medicine. So this whole thinking of taking medicine to community, so it should not be restricted. The medicine should not be restricted only to the clinics of practicing doctors. And there is a, huge role about from awareness to understanding of illness and rehabilitation when we talk about any illness. And it should be so, in my opinion, all medicine should be community medicine only. Means without community, how one can imagine medicine. So how much weightage you give to community and facility is important. Facilities are important, but if you just talk only about facilities, then it becomes a problem.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So I see there is no question. So I thank you on behalf of Niepid Regional Center, Kolkata, for joining us as a resource person. Thank you so much, sir. It was a wonderful session. And all the resource persons, I thank you to all of you. I would take few minutes because I'm supposed to be one of the resource person, and I'll have only 2 slides to share with you. So kindly bear with that, I would say. Yes. So I was supposed to talk about the prevention of addiction among persons with disabilities. So it was actually related to Dharav's topic. We have already talked about addiction enough, so I will just say few points. PWDs are more vulnerable to mental health related issues because of stigma, because they are being excluded, because they are being blamed, they are being bullied, and poor social support. The concerns about persons with disabilities when their caregivers bring them to us or when they approach to the center based services is more about their growth, their treatment, their education, their job, and economic support. In some kind of disabilities it is also about their marriage, but many times their crucial health issues uh, are being neglected, are not really given enough thought. As I would like to connect it with Sadhna ma'am's presentation, where she talked about the sexuality and the health, personal hygiene and health of a woman with disabilities. It has been observed that their IQ testing and their pension and their therapy are given so, or special education is only given importance, but irrespective of the emphasis given by special educator and vocational instructor, their personal hygiene maintenance, their menstrual hygiene maintenance is not at all given enough uh, attention. So this is something important which is directly related to their health, but is not given importance. People with disabilities are more vulnerable to get into substance abuse or addiction because one is if the addiction is made like normalized, what Dr. Dharav said, like if it is being very openly and easily being practiced around and is considered as normal, there are certain areas where I've seen myself like smoking tobacco or having alcohol is, I mean, it is like someone is standing somewhere and having a chocolate, you know. So it is that normalized and common. But persons with intellectual and developmental disability, they learn what they see more easily as compared to what they hear. So if they're seeing it being used very openly in the vicinity, whatever counseling you give them, they are more prone to get into addiction. And it is more easy to get addiction because the cognition is limited. So even if you want to give the rationalities and cognitive behavior therapies, it has its own limitations, it has its own difficulties, and it is a time taking process if we want to help a person with intellectual and developmental disabilities to get out of the addiction. Moreover, it becomes a more on a behavioral problem. Persons with disabilities are also more vulnerable to get involved in drug smuggling, and they are being misused. And so this population is more vulnerable in as far as their mental health and their susceptibility to these inappropriate social practices is involved, is concerned. And so when you know that you cannot really treat it, it is better to prevent it. And so prevention of addiction among persons with disabilities and among persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities is very, very, very important, and it needs a very special, I would say, attention of the professionals like you and me. So with this, I just stop my presentation. Thank you so much. And I will be sharing the link with all of you in the feedback link in the chat box. By the time, I would request our officer in charge, sir, for his concluding remarks. Mr. T. Mugesh, sir, officer in charge, Niepid Regional Center, Kolkata. So I will just share the feedback link. The same feedback link will also be shared in the WhatsApp as well.
Okay, keep silent. Wait.
So the feedback link is already shared in the chat box. It will also be shared in the WhatsApp group. And there might be some technical issues. So I would just thank all the resource persons and all the participants for being with us, even though it was beyond the time limit. Thank you so much for your overwhelming response. And we are looking forward to have your such cooperation even in future. I hope these topics that we selected as a part of this webinar on mental health in an unequal world you find it very useful. And we are looking forward for your feedback. So it is requested to everyone to kindly fill your feedback.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your appreciation. I can see in the chat box that you appreciated all the sessions. Thank you so much. So, yes, as the program is over, I again thank you all on behalf of Niepid Regional Center, Kolkata, And I just mentioned that the whole webinar is over, so you may leave the meeting. Thank you so much.